Welcome back to Behind the Blog. I'm Ross Levitan alongside Brandon Piller, and we are ecstatic to bring back one of our favorite friends of the show, recurring guest. It's at SensProspects. Henry, welcome back, buddy. How are you doing today?
Thanks so much for having me back, fellas. Doing great, thanks. How are you?
Oh, we're doing really well. This is kind of a new initiative we're doing, and it's nothing new for you because you've been on with us, I want to say 5 or 6 times. Pillsy, I think that Henry might be the only person who joined us back in the Making Sense of the Sens days who is still a recurring guest.
The only, yes, that is definitely an honor. The only other person I can think of, Ross, is Ian Mendez, but you interviewed him separately and we put it on the show, so not quite the same. So, yes, we'll give that honor to SensProspects.
It was such a bad interview on my part, so hopefully that one's a forgettable one. Every time we have Henry on, it's fantastic. And we want to start the same way we've done all these Behind the Blogs, is the SensProspects handle. How did that come into your possession, and how long have you even had it?
Great question. And nice. I'm gonna try and stop pumping your tires every time you ask me a question. I know I do that all the time, but
you don't have to.
I want to say it's been on Twitter for about 10 years now, around 2012-ish. I could be wrong, so maybe someone can fact check that. Maybe it's 2009, but really just kind of came from a place of feeling like folks always focused on the top tier prospects. And once you move down, let's say beyond like round 3, really there wasn't a whole lot of information about them online at the time. So a couple of friends and I had this account up and running. So I'll say there was a few of us at the time. Back in, late 2009, 2010. I want to say like tracking Chris Weidman in the NCAA is about the era where it was really hard to find out what was this guy up to. Putting up a bunch of points as a defenseman, kind of interesting. So was pretty into for a few years and kind of fell off in 2013. Took a couple breaks, a couple years off actually. I don't know. It was just different times in the Sens Twitterverse, and the prospect pool wasn't that great. And it was really the 2015 draft that kind of pulled me back in. I went to Dev Camp that summer, and it was January 2016. I got it back up and running. I think we were at about 2,500 followers at that point, and it's just been kind of me leading the charge since then to where we are today.
Yeah, that's incredible. And you do so much good work for all the people that aren't able to follow these lower level prospects over in Europe and playing in college and stuff. And we rely on you heavily for all those clips of those guys. So we got to thank you for doing that work, definitely. But what is your favorite kind of league to cover prospects from? Like when you're getting highlights and you're like, oh, nice, this is going to be a good Liga highlight or a good SHL highlight. Like there's got to be some fun aspects to digging through those that footage.
Totally. It's such an interesting way to look at things too, because you look over in Europe, like Sweden and Finland have so much country gated content that if you're not there, you can't see it. You got to try and maybe get in with a VPN or something like that. I remember when Mads Søgaard was playing in Denmark during the COVID downtime. I'd never tracked a player in that league. It was really tricky to find information. And then when you kind of filter down into like the North American junior leagues, it's almost more like a team by team basis. No surprise, someone like the London Knights, they definitely have more people on staff, more cash. So when guys like Formanton were playing there, you'd get like 3-4 angles of any one of his goals. Whereas think back to Drake Batherson playing in the Q, Cape Breton, probably lower budget. It would be like this stationary camera that slightly moved, and you'd kind of have to peer to see what happens. So I guess it's a bit of a washy answer, but the better funded teams in the Canadian Hockey League definitely make my job a lot easier.
And the biggest gong show?
Biggest gong show would be maybe the BCHL. That's a lot of like static cameras. Luke Lowhite, tracking him there, for example, was one. It's gotten better for sure in the past couple of years, and I'll give you that one.
So through 10 years, who's the one prospect you fell in love with the most immediately? Like as a prospect, not because later on you're like, oh, they ended up being good.
Oh, man. Well, I'll go back to that 2015 Dev Camp, right? You look at the names of fellas that were drafted there. And we've talked about this in the past too. You know, I used to be a goalie. I love the gear. I loved seeing Joey Decord come out in his, I think it was Muskegon kit, and it was all purple, just like a really striking color to see at an Ottawa event. But the shootout happened right in front of me. They did the shootout drill, and Thomas Chabot, I think, pulled the Forsberg on him, and Dak just got a toe on it. But I was like, wow, Shabbat had, he really didn't come in with the hype that he sort of caught up to him in the year or two after getting drafted. So that was really a point where I was like, hey, I should kind of get back into this prospect game. So it's crazy that 7 years later he's still around.
I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so as we're doing the behind the blog story, I want to get more info on what goes on at Sens Prospects and like what's the motivation to keep going? Like you get started, you're like, oh, this is fun, I'm tracking prospects, but like we just talked about, you've been doing this for a while. What's that motivation that is keeping you up, sifting through highlights and doing Lord's work for Sens fans?
It's a variety of different things. I'll also say I think it's really important to take some time off or take some breaks occasionally, at least for myself. Maybe that like multi-year off was a bit too much, but even let's say in the past couple months, I haven't been as tuned in since the draft ended. I love baseball. Going to see the Jays in Pittsburgh this weekend, actually.
Hopefully they score some runs for you. Sheesh.
Yeah, fingers crossed there. But then having, content creators like you two, I ripped through, I want to say 15 episodes in the past 3 or 4 days. And now we're seeing all these guys on the ice in Ottawa, they're training. I'm just getting so fired up for it. Right. So that aside, why do I keep doing it? Well, part of it is, in my professional life, I do work in a lot of the online advertising space. So understanding the inner workings of these like social media channels actually ends up being kind of like a fun parallel way for me to build skills that way that doesn't actually feel like work. So I kind of like that aspect of it, but also, I don't know, it's the fan base. Like I wouldn't do this if people didn't, interact and react and amplify, the work that I'm putting out there too. Right. So the fact that we have such like a dedicated and I'd say pretty like tight knit community online, that really encourages me to keep going. And then look at, the team has had a variety of different initiatives where, given me the opportunity to interview some players at Dev Camp or go check out games at the CTC. Really appreciate that. And it all just kind of comes down. It's a love of the game, love of the team, and amazing fan base too.
I love that. That's awesome. Everyone's already following you. But if for some reason, somehow, some way you aren't, make sure you are on Twitter at SensProspects and the YouTube channel as well at SensProspects there. And Henry, you were actually at Dev Camp. Speaking of 2015, fast forward 7 years, you were able to take two trips out to the Sensplex this past July. What was your scouting report after those?
Yeah, it was fantastic to see Tyler Boucher in person for the first time for myself. I somehow didn't make it to a 67s game with him. I will say I became a dad in the past year and a bit too, so that's also adjusted the social calendar for me a little bit.
Fair.
But, looking at like some of the new guys, I was also stoked to see Oliver Johansson in person. Right away though, thinking of someone that you guys spoke to not too long ago, Stephen Halliday. Man, what a player out there. Sure, he's a year or two older than maybe a lot of the fellas, but those are 3 names right away. I mean, it's a chance to see guys on the ice live for the first time that always kind of really pulls me into Dev Camp. But those are 3 names that really stick out to me as being very positive forces at this year's Dev Camp.
I always go back to the first time I went to go see Dev Camp. I think it was 2011 or 2012. And, there's always those guys who stand out. And I'm surprised you didn't say one of your favorite prospects was Marcus Nurmi, because he was similar. He was similar to Mark Stone, who I'm going to bring up here in 2011, 2012, where they're just like so much bigger than the other guys that they just have this presence about them. I'd imagine Halliday was probably like that, 6'4", 210. Like they just look like men amongst boys out on the ice, not necessarily in every sort of skill. And with Mark Stone, they had Shelly Kettles out there with them, and he was the only guy who fell during skating drills. So you're just like, man. And obviously that was the knock on him, and certainly he's made the most out of his skill set. But it's those little intricacies that you don't get from covering the team, for example, in Winnipeg. But being able to have boots on the ground at Dev Camp, and then when we were starting making sense of the Sens, that was our first time where the team actually gave us a little bit of access. So I got to be in the first ever scrum when Brady Tkachuk was in town, and you have that epic photo from that same Dev Camp where he's wearing number 27.
Weird.
Well, imagine a parallel universe where Brady Tkachuk's wearing number 27 for the Sens.
There's got to be a couple 27 jerseys kicking around out there for sure.
Yeah.
And I love that you mentioned Mark Stone falling on one of Shelley's drills. Mark Kastelich did the same thing 3 years ago. The first camp he came to, he was the guy, he bailed, I want to say multiple times. And, it's a little awkward as you're watching it because there's really not a lot of people there. The guys will often then finish the drill and you're making eye contact with them. You've been filming it, but it's like, hey, he's persevered. So happy to see that. And who knows, maybe we've got another Mark Stone type on our hands.
Yeah, no doubt. Also late round pick at the long flow. They kind of they've got a little similar look. I won't say they look alike, but a little similar style there. We'll say with those two. All right, so everyone's already following. You've got a video coming out. That's how we're leading into Dev Camp. So everyone check out Sens Prospects YouTube page, behind the scenes, we'll call it, or boots on the ground, as we like to say on this show. Video coming up at Dev Camp. I like the shout outs you gave, but now it's time for a prospect pyramid. We know the rankings. We've had our own. We've got the organizational value rankings, tier 2, tier 1 coming out next week. And if you've missed any, you can go find that on our YouTube page at Locked On Senators. But we're going to do things a little bit different. Henry threw together the list, Mr. Sens Prospects himself, but why don't you explain how you've listed each tier? Because it's not your typical, like, okay, 5th tier is like depth, maybe AHLers working your way up to an elite prospect. How did you symbolize each one of these tiers?
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't want to just do that typical ranking where we're arguing, hey, I had this guy in 8, you had him in 10.
Really like Hamara Nordberg?
Exactly, right? Kind of
contentious discussion.
Brilliant.
I also like that we're talking before the season starts, right? Because this is kind of how you get a little behind the blog into, okay, as we're heading into the season, how am I grouping these different players, right? And I think there's still 5 tiers here, but each prospect is on sort of a different time horizon relative to when are they drafted and when are they expected to hit that point where the Senators organization will have to either say, yeah, we want to, bring you up into the pros and sign you, or it's time to cut and move on from you, right? And depending on where somebody is in that journey also sort of affects how I'm looking at them, what my expectations are from them during the season in that sort of way too. So that's a little background on I guess what is maybe a bit of a different tiering system for these guys, and would be happy to kind of talk more about any of them or just about the tiers themselves as we go here.
Yeah, for sure. We got your list this morning. We checked it twice. Pilsy and I have some questions of each one. Where do you want to start?
Whatever is easiest for you. Whatever you got up, we'll go from there.
Well, why don't we go with the organizational bubble? Because I think this one's interesting because for some, they don't even have a chance, in my opinion. But for others, I still see a little bit of a chance that they become like effective NHLers. So explain the organizational bubble, and then we'll get into who you have in that tier.
Totally. So there's a couple of, not to give anyone away yet, but there are a couple guys that we're literally coming up onto their last season within the org where the Sens have a deadline in the summer of 2023. You're going to have to sign this guy or he's going to go off into free agency, right? There's a handful of guys in college hockey that kind of fit that bill. On the other side of things, there are a number of, I'd say, more familiar names too that we talk about more often that, at least in my view, they didn't show as much growth last season as you would have liked to have seen. So this season is really critical because you don't want to see back-to-back seasons of sort of plateaued or potential regression. And because we just come off another new draft, right? And the Sens had a ton of picks. There's so many more guys now coming into the stable, whereas previously maybe we only had 20 or so prospects to talk about. I think we're over 30 here now, right? So I think there's less time that the organization has to make a decision on these players too, right? So that was the thinking as to you're on the bubble, you're kind of on the hot seat as to like prove your point here, prove that you're worth keeping around relative to everyone else. And I'd love to see some of these guys do absolutely that, right? But that's sort of the billing on this group.
All right, let's start. Without further ado, I'm pulling up the list as well. Run us through each guy here and why it's a pivotal season for them. I guess you can. I've always thought that Novak and Loheit are kind of the same person, like same trajectory, both late picks in 2018, both went the college route. I think it was Novak that transferred to Northeastern, if I'm not mistaken, from Bentley. Take us through why these guys are make or break. I'm more so curious beyond Johnny Ginn and Tyconic here.
For sure. We can rip through the first 3 really easily, right? These are all just NCAA guys who I think will have excellent pro careers, whether in North America or over in Europe, but maybe one of the 3 gets a look within the Sens org. I put my money on Loheit just because he's the youngest and skates well. He looks like sort of your prototypical bottom 6 guy, maybe middle 6 in the AHL at best. But I really wouldn't be surprised. Let's say a year from now, we do the same thing again none of these three are in the org anymore.
Yeah, we actually forgot Johnny Tyconic on our organizational value rankings. That just kind of shows where we have him slotted, Pills?
Yeah, well, but there was that weird exception to the rule where he can have another extended year or something like that due to COVID. Am I right on that, Henry?
Yeah, so it's weird because him and Novak are the exact same. They both were able to go back to school for a fifth year because they kind of lost a year due to COVID. Both took advantage of it. The Sens maintain their rights until they leave school. So as long as they're in school that year, that gets pushed back. Novak was at Dev Camp this summer. Tyconic has been mentioned, in Sens official press releases in, I don't know, over a year probably.
Last I heard from him, he was doing an interview this year, and he's like, yeah, I'm a diehard Calgary Flames fan. That's my team. They're like, even though you got drafted out, he's like, yeah, I'm a Flames fan.
That's a tough look. I mean, that the writing's on the wall there, I think.
He'll be playing for the Calgary Wranglers there, that new AHL team back home in no time. That's my official prediction.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, you want to move on to the
and goalie friendly show. You're a goalie too. Like Levi Marilainen going back to Carpat. Do you think that extends him some wiggle room here, or does that tighten things up?
Well, we got to, acknowledge the elephant in the room too of if there is a Chychrun trade to be made and they want a goalie prospect back. I'd say for now, if he still has value and this is someone who's of interest, would probably be the one that I would sort of sign up to move out.
Right.
He put up good win totals in the OHL last year, but save percentage wasn't great, right? It's in the 880s, something like that. Playing behind a strong team, it was always high scoring games. Yes, I get it. He's moved to North America, new team, new rink, all that sort of stuff, but you kind of have a bit of a down or flat year, really, relative to what I think a lot of people would have hoped to have seen. And then we have this whole World Juniors tournament that just came off, right? Where, good, not great. And then he loses the job in the semis. So it's just, 2 points don't make a pattern, but we're sort of trending in that direction. And I think this is absolutely going to be a pivotal season for him. So that's why he fits on the bubble right now.
Yeah, I think that's fair for sure. I want to jump to Ben Roger because he's a very polarizing prospect. Drafted in the second round, maybe a little early. That's definitely something that I think is the consensus here. But what did you see from him last season? And I'm kind of with you on this one where it really seemed like he plateaued a little bit and there wasn't much room for improvement or there's lots of room for improvement, for Ben Roger in this upcoming season. What's your evaluation on him so far?
Yeah, that's another guy who got traded in the middle of the season, went from London to Kingston and missed, seemed to be off and on, in and out of the lineup. Kingston wasn't the greatest about, reporting on, is this an injury or what's going on here? Seems to skate pretty well, but even at Dev Camp, he was a little bit of a drill buster, right? Which again, it's just a limited sample size, right? But sort of his hockey IQ and puck skills have always been a bit of a question, even back when he was drafted. So let's see, he should be a top end defenseman in the OHL at this point, being a second round pick. Let's see it, buddy.
Well, I want to see it out of JBD this year. What to you would put him out of this bubble and into a tier like the one that we'll get to a little bit later where you're ready to graduate? Because at some point, Brady Tkachuk, I know it's a different circumstance, but he's going into his fifth NHL season right now, and they were drafted in the same first round.
Yeah, everything about JBD is just so relaxed, but also that includes sort of his growth trajectory into becoming an NHLer or not. It just is there never seems to be too much anxiety or rush around him. And last year it was I'll point to the point production. Sure, that's not the name of his game, but also speaks to really what is he doing other than defending, which obviously, no doubt, it's a critical part of what he does. But you are tough pressed to have too many guys on your back end who only are true defensive specialists, right? He had 2 goals last year. They both came in the same game, I think in the same period.
Wow. Okay.
Right. So he had this tiny flash in the pan. As he's not young, right? He's not young to be an AHL rookie too. So I think it was a fine season. I think everyone thought he looked comfortable in the NHL, but again, a little anonymous. So I'd like to see him just be more of a presence, more noticeable beyond just sort of a steady, solid, a little bit boring stay-at-home guy.
Yeah, is that similar for Maxence Scanette? Where are you at with him? Because he was in and out of the lineup a little bit as a right shot defenseman in the AHL, but it seems like there are some people who have him as a higher prospect level than Tyler Boucher and others there in that ranking that just came out. I think it was Silver 7 Sens. But all in all, I mean, what would he have to do to impress you next season?
Become an everyday player, and let's see if he can build on the point totals. I thought a lot of, maybe not a lot, but he got some lucky goals last year, right? Like seeing eye shots from the point that if it's kind of judging him based on it's a impressive point to games played ratio for someone of his age moving into the AHL. But yeah, let's that was a team that was ravaged by injuries. We don't know, how badly did things with the whole COVID issues that the team had. Did they affect him or not? But you really want to see him be an everyday player. And again, let's see, is he more than just a similar type right-hand shot, good skater, kind of like JBD, right? Can these guys show that, hey, they do have it's hockey IQ or it's puck handling or something maybe on the offensive side that, really like elevates them beyond the rest of the pack.
Yeah, I think we're ready to move to the next tier. That pretty much wraps up that one. Ross, where do you want to take us next?
Let's go with everyone else, because to me, this one, I just want to get out of the way because it's kind of an interesting group of players. And you were saying that it's not necessarily a bad thing to be in everyone else. It just means for your evaluation of going to the season, you don't expect there to be much variance one way or another. Am I saying that right?
Interesting grouping of players, and I like that you said it's not bad to be on this list. It's more like they have hit. I'd say they leveled up, especially let's say like last season or the last two seasons, where it's pretty predictable what I think all of these guys are going to do this season. Clevin is going to play top end minutes in the NCAA. He's going to leave school and he's going to turn pro. Sogard is going to take the net in Belleville. Mando is hopefully going to play more games than he did last year. We'll see if this affiliation with Allen down in Texas means he gets more time in the ECHL as well. We'll see. And the bottom four players too, I'd say none of them really did a whole lot last year to push them into any sort of contentious area. It's just sort of keep doing what you're doing, continue to get better. Their decision point within the org, I think, is still 2-3 years away. So again, I don't see this year as being like the make or break season for the bottom four names on this list. And we can go into any of these names in a little bit more detail, but that's kind of the overview of this. Admittedly kind of had to group 7 fellas together and see sort of what's one label I could give to all of it.
I think kind of the most intriguing guy out of here, because like you mentioned, we kind of have an idea of where these guys are going to be and what roles they're going to play. That would be Kevin Mandolese, especially because they brought in Antoine Bibeau. So now you're going to have Sogard, Bibeau, and Mandolese as your non-NHLers. Let's just put it that way. Do you think that Mando will really be more of a starter in the ECHL and kind of come up when injuries or roster moves happen to the AHL? Or do you think he gets the inside track on the AHL backup job, and then depending on how he does, you slot Bibeau in accordingly?
I think it's all about reps for him now. I wouldn't be surprised to see him and Bibeau do a little bit of a tag team where Mando, it should be all about reps, right? Mando should just be playing, seeing shots, right? And the Sens, especially in the last 5 years, whether it's Hogberg, Decord, Gustafsson, all of them saw time in the ECHL, right? Just to like get off the bench in Belleville. And so I would say, yeah, let's see Mando more in the ECHL, bring him up for spurts, and then Bibeau, who I believe played in Allen last season, right?
He did.
He can go back down there. He's got his guaranteed money wherever he ends up, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I don't think we have to spend too much longer on that one. The other guys, although this is YouTube exclusive, so everyone could see the list there. But Tyler Clevin, like you said, kind of the trajectory it is there. Cole Reinhardt projects just as a bottom 6 energy guy. I think whether it's at the AHL or NHL level, he's just going to bring speed and penalty killing. Latz is the one guy, though, that I might have as a closer to a breakout candidate. And yes, I'm a little biased in there, but playing top minutes. You talked about other guys who've been traded in the middle of last season. Now he's got a full-time top 6 role in Prince Albert, where he's the unofficial mayor. So we will see what Latz can bring next season as he moves forward. The evaluation phase, which is pretty much another way of saying the 2022 NHL draft class, outside of one or two guys who we'll get to a little bit later. But these are guys, especially the way you evaluate, Henry, where you just need to see some more.
That's it, right? And I'll speak for all Sens fans on this one, right? Philip Nordberg is the great unknown within the entire system, I'd say. But then you've got it's 3 left-handed defensemen, I think, on here, or three of them. Another one's on another part of the rankings, right? But yeah, let's see. I will say about this last draft class, a guy like Cam O'Neill or Tyson Dick, I like that the Sens took a player that it's a skilled player with a high ceiling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ideally, I'd like to see them do more of that in earlier rounds, not in the later end of the draft, but still, it's a step in the right direction, right? Both those guys are high-end offensive guys, albeit maybe in lower levels, as they move towards both playing in UMass in a couple seasons. So let's see what that looks like this year.
Oh yeah, true. Hey, they're going to be teammates then.
They will be teammates in I think it's 2023, 2024. This year they're both slated to play in the USHL. So I don't really know why Tyson Dick would move from the BCHL to the USHL. Maybe that's just to be closer to the college or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. And the Sens have mentioned they have a connection, and it was Cam O'Neill who was telling us as well that the head coach there, Greg Carville, used to be an assistant coach for a long time, actually, in Ottawa. So great to see. You're going to have to cover some USHL this year. Theo Wahlberg's also going to the USHL before he heads to Ohio State. The one other name I want to bring up here is Jorian Donovan, who was definitely not selected because his dad's a part of the organization. They made that very clear. He was also, though, a healthy scratch at times on Hamilton's run to winning the OHL and making the Memorial Cup. Is that something that you won't hold against him based on the quality of team? And usually those teams are also older, more 18, 19-year-olds?
Yeah, absolutely not. Even another Sens prospect was affected by that when they shipped out Chandler Romeo. He got moved from Hamilton to Sarnia to make way as they were just going all in. When you get a guy like Mason McTavish, you're kind of selling the farm to surround him with guys who can lead you to the Memorial Cup, which they achieved. They got there, right? I think they got all the way to the final too. So.
Yeah, and then they ran into another prospect who we'll get to as well. But I like this tier here, and however, there are two players from the 2022 draft class who we haven't gotten to. Pilsy, I want you to direct traffic here, whether we're going to go breakout potential. Yeah, I think breakout potential, or do you want to save that for the last one?
No, let's go breakout potential because, we went from guys plateauing, the unknown. Now here's the upside. Let's go with the upside.
All right, so we got breakout potential. Then we have NHL bubble. Then we have just straight up ready to graduate. But when it comes to breakout potential, these are players who, if I'm reading it here right, Henry, you have them as becoming household names or establishing themselves as can't miss prospects. So I'd say that it's a pretty important year for the upside of this group of players. Would you say that's fair?
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. Critical year for these guys I think it's all about consistency, right? There have been flashes for a number of them last season. It's all about taking that next step this season, but I'd say most of them benefit from a little bit of that buffer of if there's a speed bump here or there, they'll get another season or two to work through it. Top to bottom here, if you want to work through it, Oliver Johansson, right? He should be getting a full look in the Swedish Hockey League this season after, playing. Yeah, sure, he got a look there last season, but most of his time was in the junior ranks. My big worry there is that he kind of gets buried on a fourth line and plays 5 to 8 minutes a night, kind of like what happened to Victor Lodin in the season that the Sens, after they picked him, he could barely get on the ice. It's very common over in Sweden, so we'll keep an eye on that one.
Yeah, I always get worried about that. It's not as bad as the KHL, but it's not too much better when it comes to them playing young players. However, when it comes to Oliver Johansson, clearly the offensive upside is there. And you saw that at Dev Camp too?
Yeah, just a smooth guy. Skates really well. It's almost like skating and all of his lateral movement is secondary in his mind, and he's able to just think about what he's seeing on the ice, what he's going to do next, right? And that sort of natural motor is happening that can kind of push him around the ice. So it was great to see him live for the first time, and we'll keep a close eye on. Maybe he's a long shot for the Swedish team at the World Juniors that start on Boxing Day too this year. We'll see.
True. That'd be awesome. Yeah, you've got a few guys over in Sweden to take care of this year with Nordberg and Oscar Pettersson as well. Tomas Hamara was the other selection in the third round this year for the Ottawa Senators, and he made news this week, signing with the Kitchener Rangers. So you won't have to go too far to find footage of Tomas Hamara, although he's been playing pro, so somewhat of a step back. The alternate Lassie Thompson timeline, where he was drafted out of the WHL or CHL to make it an easier comparison, and then went over to Liga. Now Hamara comes from Liga over to the OHL. Do you expect that to do wonders for his offensive game or his all-around game?
I'd say both. A lot of things to chime in on here. With Hamara going to Kitchener to, it's a well-funded org. Logan Brown played there for a bit, so we're going to get lots of nice highlights from them. But they have gone in pretty heavy on. They're going to be stacked this season.
They've got a couple other draft picks too. I think Philip Machar from the Habs, first-round pick.
Yeah, they should be a good team.
One too.
They just pulled someone away from the NCAA, I want to say too, right? Which was a pretty big
last
get.
year they got Roman Schmidt, this enormous defenseman who's actually got Ottawa ties. I think Tampa Bay ended up selecting him. So yeah, they're certainly loading up. Pilsy hates this too. He's a Guelph Storm guy.
Well, boots on the ground, right, Pilsy?
Yeah. I'll definitely check in on Thomas Hamara when they're playing against the Storm. That's for sure.
I think with both Hamara and Halliday, what I like is with Halliday moving to the NCAA and Hamara. When I put this list together, he's either Liga or OHL. Who knew? They're playing in leagues where we have a comfortable baseline against which we can kind of compare them, right? Whereas Halliday coming out of the USHL, it's a bit of a crapshoot, and Hamara over as like a young kid, undrafted in the Liga, you don't really know what type of opportunity he's getting. So I think it's fantastic that he's going to be in the OHL, learn the North American rink, that'll just benefit his all-around game.
Now, what did you see from Hamara in the World Juniors that maybe you're thinking, okay, from what I saw, it makes sense that he goes to North America, or from what I saw, maybe he should have gone back to Liga? What was your kind of evaluation based on his performance and then ultimately his decision?
I thought it was good to see that he seemed to be given a greater role as the tournament went along. It's always tricky to really change any coach's mind in a tournament that's so short, right? They kind of got to put their cards on the table from day one and just go all in. Although Finland kind of went the other way with their goalie situation.
Yes.
But, he was also, this is a tournament where I felt like we had a ton of folks in the Sens community watching the games, clipping the games, and he wasn't without his mistakes, right? He's not on as competitive of a team, but he was forcing some pucks up the middle. Playing against better opponents. And I think one of the best ways to learn is to, you kind of play almost up a level in a way, not saying that's what he was doing, right? But I don't know, overall encouraged by what I saw at the tournament, and he should be back again for the tournament that happens, in a couple months from now too, right?
Yeah, I like that. I want to skip over Halliday. We'll get back to him. But since we're talking World Juniors, I think Zach Ostapchuk certainly did his stock pretty well with a gritty fourth line performance, showed some hands. His one goal, it made the score 11-1, but we still like the performance as a whole. I see you've got an asterisk beside his name too. What does that symbolize?
That was just, I would have had him on here before the World Juniors, right? It was just sort of, now he's become such a household name, but it was the way that he finished the season after the WHL trade deadline. He got so much more time and really took advantage of it that he would have been such a much more under the radar, right? So I put a star next to him, just saying, I get that it's a bit of a cheap, it's an easy one for me here, but worth calling out.
Right. And did he play center exclusively in the WHL?
Primarily, yeah.
Okay, good. I like that. That's where I want to see him develop.
With Ostapchuk, it's interesting though. I was reading Mendez's article on The Athletic, and he was saying that with the COVID clauses and stuff like that between the NHL and CHL, that Zach Ostapchuk is not eligible to play in the AHL. He has to go back to the Vancouver Giants. What do you think that does for him? Because personally, especially after he popped off late in the season with the Giants and after having a good showing in the World Juniors, I wouldn't have been too upset or surprised if he got a chance to try to make the team in Belleville, but that's not an option now. How do you think he's going to come back to the WHL? He's going to dominate, no?
You got to see, just more consistent point production too. He went, I think he had a couple 5-game stretches where he didn't put up a point last season, right? So sure, a little of that's opportunity, but also just about becoming a more complete, consistent player. That's what we want to see. It's not quite the same, but it's like when Ridley Gregg, he really should not have gone back to Brandon.
Definitely,
Didn't have anywhere else to go, right? So you kind of work with within the rules that way, and hope that he puts up some ridiculous numbers here.
Yeah. Last thing about Ostapchuk, and this is more from what you watched in Vancouver. Do you think that a large number of those points were predicated by having Fabian Lysell on his unit? Because it seemed like he was flying out there all the time.
Yeah, well, it's tough to say.
It
wasn't like Ostapchuk was just coasting out there. I'll say
right.
that, right?
Okay.
He definitely created his own stuff here and there.
That's awesome. And I was doing a project this past winter for the Jets, and it was like Road to the NHL features. And one of their coaches, their associate coach, used to be the head coach of the Manitoba Moose. Anyways, long story short, he's with the Giants now, and he saw the Sens jersey when we were talking in the background. He's like, "Yo, you are gonna love this kid. He's just gritty, but he's got hands. He's fast. He's got all the tools.
Well, yeah.
It's about putting everything together." But that's why I asked about if he played center primarily, because it's just such you're used to having the big centerman, but the big centers that can skate, they just add this whole other element and opening up space for their wingers involved as well. So I love that. I have a similar question actually moving down the list. Philippe Daoust, where do you see him projecting at the next level? I know he's played some center and some wing.
Yeah, we'll see what it looks like in Belleville this year, right? Probably a mid-6 guy to start. I'd love to see him get some power play time. I think he was struggling for a role on that team last year when he started there. It was nice to kind of see him go back to the queue and multi-points per game kind of production on the way to the Memorial Cup with St. John. Again, we'll see it. He's a late bloomer. It would not surprise me to see him really take an opportunity here with Belleville and really start to put up some points early in the season. And become much more of a household name of a prospect that I'd say for now is kind of flying under the radar for a lot of fans.
Yeah, Pillsy and I thought we saw his first AHL goal. It got taken away from, and then he never ended up getting one.
We'll see. We'll have to be in attendance for the next one.
Yeah, no doubt. A guy who's got plenty of AHL experience, and I might be dating this. This might come back to haunt me because I'm going to say that Roby Arventi was on LOSP yesterday. We're now talking into the future and now backwards.
Yep.
Hopefully. You heard from him yesterday, but what a development path for him. Coming over and being the youngest player in the AHL. How confident are you? Especially, I know it's just a 2-week sample in the middle of the summer, but he popped off at the World Juniors as well. I'd say even overshadowing Ostapchuk. Sure, yeah, he was a grit grinder out there, but Roby was a legitimate point-producing threat.
Top 3 player for Finland at the tournament. You love to see that after it really wasn't a great World Juniors for him last time around too, right?
That's being a little generous.
Yeah, right. So, and he's a great piece on him by the Silver Sevens crew that just went out.
Ari wrote that.
Ari this week. Yeah, exactly. You got to keep in mind this kid he's so young, right? To have already played in the AHL as much as he has, as well as in the Liga. I just think it's always going to be tough knowing that JJ Peterka was right there. So those are the two that you kind of keep an eye on. Hopefully people remember that too in the years to come. The Shane Pinto pick, you want to go back, was so contentious because Kaliev and Bobby Brink were on the board at the same time too, right? So right now
they went the next 2 picks. So it wasn't like it was just a consensus. It was then bang, bang.
Yeah. So I know a bit of a detour there in my mind, but no, I think we're going to be very happy with Roby as the season goes along, right? Should improve on that mid-30s point total that he put up last year as an AHL rookie.
Low-key, enormous individual too. When I was in the bottom of the rink taking some video or whatever when they were in Manitoba, like they're all coming by. They obviously all look big. They're wearing skates. I'm out there in my shoes, but among them, Roby is an enormous kid. He's got the baby face, but he's like 6'4", I would say, easily.
Just needs more compete or maybe
more consistent.
Needs that push. Yes, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, fair.
Now, before we move on, we got to talk about probably the most polarizing prospects.
Should we touch on Halliday first? We got to lead into our boy, our son.
Okay, sure.
Henry became a dad this year. You and I became a dad last July, Pills.
Your son.
Oh yeah, but tell us about Halliday. I know you said he looked good at Dev Camp. What is it about his game, and where does how was he passed over twice and a 4th round pick? Like, what is it about his game that needs the most work?
I could not. I think I listen to you guys when I'm driving my car a lot, and I almost went off the road when he said he lost 35 pounds over the course of a summer, right?
Crazy.
That is just unbelievable. So no doubt that would have been a red flag. There's a whole cascade of issues there, right? It's his mobility, his ability to keep up with the play, all that sort of stuff, right? So also just seems to be a pretty laid back individual, and maybe just kind of needed that extra year or two to get there. It was probably on some people's radars last season, but it was a bit of a, hey, let's wait and see what he can do. And now he's going into the NCAA as it was someone at Elite Prospects, I want to say, is kind of highlighting him as one of the rookies to watch. Sure, he's maybe a year or two older than your typical NCAA rookie, but with what he did in the USHL last year, he should hit the ground running with Ohio State. It shouldn't be the Ohio State, Ross. I know you love to say that, but it shouldn't. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what Halliday can do, because it really seemed like he had a hold on the USHL, putting up massive numbers, and now to NCAA and playing in Ohio, he's going to get an opportunity to, it's not a massive jump up, but it's a jump up, and it's a different style, it's a different schedule, all these kinds of things. So that's going to change. What do you think his kind of defining attribute is? Obviously, putting up points in the USHL, there could be a lot of different ways to attack this, but where do you think he's going to shine in the NCAA level?
His hands looked amazing at Dev Camp, especially for a big fella, right? So as long as he can keep working on his skating too, it sounds like he's going to be in really close contact with the Sens Dev staff all season.
Yep.
I think it's going to be, people might think of him as, I guess, a goal scorer first, but he seemed to think of himself as a playmaker, right? So let's see if that hockey IQ can translate as he steps up a level in competition.
Yeah, no, that was funny. I was like, "Oh, you're not much of a disher," and he's like, "Well, I kind of that's a big part of my game." And after I was like, "Yeah, he had over 60 assists." So saying Halliday's not a disher, that is not a true statement at all. But that's okay. You swing and a miss once in a while. Yeah, that'll happen.
That's good.
Yeah. Okay. Now we got to go to Tyler Boucher, because there's so many different opinions you can have on this guy, and I think what a lot of people, the issue is they aren't able to kind of put into fact what the person Tyler Boucher had to go through last year and how that might have affected his on-ice performance. Now there's no confusion. Is he in college? Is he going to go to the OHL? What's happening there? Where is he living? How are his injuries?
Does he have COVID? Is he injured?
Exactly. Yeah. All those clouding questions about him should be in the clear. It should be all sunshine from here. How well do you think that's going to set up his season? Personally, I'm assuming he's going to play a full season back with the Ottawa 67s. I think that's best for his development, just because, not because I don't think he's ready for the AHL or can't play that style of game yet, just because he needs to have just one solid year of hockey. How do you see his next season playing out here?
Yeah, totally agree there, Pilsy. It's all about just going into a season being comfortable with what is his role, what is the team, what is his living situation, all this sort of stuff is for the first time in years. It's not sort of new for him, right? So there can be some familiarity and comfort, and a story that I will always call back to when we're talking about prospects. And relative to the club, remember when the Sens went over and played those games in Sweden? And then they come back and they started losing. And it was just like, the time change is brutal. Like, these guys got to give them some time to get better, right? There was just so much slack, I thought, given to that team just for doing, a week in Europe, right? Whereas you think these guys are teachers, their lives and their bodies are changing, right? That has a huge impact on guys that it can easily derail an entire season at a time.
They're creatures of habit, and you're throwing off their routine immensely.
Yep. Exactly. So I just love that it just seems he should know exactly what he's walking into this year, and hopefully that translates to even more production than we've seen over the last little while.
And I think he would agree with that to the extent, or to the proof that he stayed in Ottawa all summer, getting to skate and be around Sean Donovan, Jesse Winchester, and living with Jake Sanderson, a guy who is just a born leader, a guy who just sets the tone with his work ethic and everything.
His discipline, that's the big thing. Like, learning from Jake Sanderson's discipline. Not that Boucher is undisciplined, but just learning from a guy like Jake Sanderson that is regimented, early bedtime, like has all his stuff figured out. That's got to be a positive too.
Yeah, I think so. What would be a successful season for you, Henry, this year for Tyler Boucher?
Point a game player in the OHL.
Yep.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah. And maybe less than 2 suspensions?
Less than 2 suspensions and like
One's fine, you know. Hey,
It
if someone takes a
happens.
run at your guy, let's go. But under 2.
He's just he's just bigger than people out there too, right? I'd also like
Yeah.
to see him miss less than, let's say, 10% of this season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The boards are so loud at the Civic Center too. When he hits guys, it's insane. So yeah, definitely worthy to go check out. If you're in the Ottawa area, go check out some 67s games. Get your boosh on the ground as a little play on boots there. And just look up the loudest dude will be Lalim's Marsh, and they're waving the pom poms and everything. So no, I'm excited for Tyler. And also, Pillsy, you mentioned like the difference playing AHL versus OHL. What I think is he's going to benefit from most playing the OHL is having a little more time with the puck on his stick. Like gaps and seams aren't going to close as fast, and he'll actually be able to time. He'll get his timing back, I think, a little bit more, and I think that's what gets lost when the most he's played in one place over the last 5 years since he was playing minor hockey was 24 games for the Ottawa 67s. Like that's nuts. In minor hockey, 14-year-olds are playing more than 24 games. I think it's a 32-game season. For 14-year-olds who go to school, they're going to be mathematicians or scientists. So I think that for him, he needs to play, like Henry said, more than 90% of the season, get in there. And from all accounts, he made an impression at the World Junior Camp. They only took 3 guys who were under 19 years old. One of them was the 3rd overall pick. One of them is going to be a top 5 pick next year, Charlie Stramel, and he only played in 1 game. So I think that his goal, and for answering my own question, I think a successful season includes a trip to the World Juniors at Christmas.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah. All right. Should we move on to these last one? I mean, this was the most, I don't know if contention's the right word, but and Pillsy, I looked it up. He had 60 assists, Halliday, in 62 games.
Not a disher.
only an assist per game player. So we're getting to a couple friends of the show, one in particular at this NHL bubble, and I want to start with him. And I'm going to wait to pull up this list because at this point, I think our viewers are going through their checklist of Sens prospects and like who haven't we heard of just yet. Prime for NHL debuts or increased roles in the NHL this upcoming season. It's going to be one of my favorite days of this Sens season if and when Angus Crookshank makes his NHL debut. All of last year wiped out. Remind Sens fans, because obviously we're a little biased, what is Angus Crookshank as a prospect and as a player?
I mean, Crooker, right? He is, there's a lot of Ridley Gregg, honestly, in his game, right? Because he loves to mix it up in front of the net. He's a smaller player, but he puts up points. And there's always that concern, hey, he's doing it at the NCAA. What's it going to translate to in the AHL? We actually saw a really good sample in that COVID-shortened season with Belleville. He quickly became a top 6 guy down there. It was just such a brutal bounce for him to lose out on last season. He is one of 2 guys I have pegged as I expect him to make his NHL debut at some point this season.
I believe the other's a friend of the show, but before we get to, or sorry, actually he already had, but maybe we'll get to another one. However, Pillsy, do you have anything else on Crooker?
Crooker is going to have a massive season. And I think, it's really unfortunate he lost that whole year because he was really pushing to at least get in a game, maybe in the playoffs. But part of me thinks positive Pillsy. I'll try to put a good spin on it. That was a good thing because now he's like, I am so hungry. I didn't even get a nibble of hockey last year. Not even a taste.
Not even an amuse-bouche, eh?
Yeah, no amuse-bouche for Crooker. So now he's coming in starving, and I think he's going to blow the doors off when he has a top 6 role in Belleville.
I'm sure you listened to him, Henry, when he said, when I asked him about playing on a line potentially with Kelly and Casti, like he just ate that up. Like that's the type of role that I think we're going to see from him at the NHL level.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Even look at his cover photo on Twitter, right? It's him right in the face of like a couple guys on the Moose.
A guy they're looking up at him, or he's looking up at those guys too. He's like, "Let's go!" Little David versus Goliath action. We love Crooker here, and like I said, it's truly going to be one of my favorite days next year if he can get over that year. He hasn't played a game of hockey in 12 months coming up, so I know it sucks, but this guy is resilient, and like he said, man, you don't know what you got till it's gone, and just makes him that much hungrier. Hungry like a shark, you could say. You have Igor Sokolov as another bubble breakout candidate, or NHL bubble, I should say. What is it about his game that gives you the confidence that he'll be able to keep up with the pace at the NHL level?
Yeah. My Wi-Fi just dropped for a second. I just missed what name did you say there?
I was just saying Igor. Oh, you missed my transition? I said he's hungry like a shark. Igor Sokolov, another one. Anyways, here you go. Igor, what with the pace? Do you think that's going to be an issue playing at the NHL level? It was kind of unfair. His first appearance at the NHL level was during that ravaged COVID streak. And of course, you're not playing with the most ideal line mates. I feel like in a perfect world, he's playing with guys whose speed can open up ice for him. And then he's just the trigger man who can go in there and put the puck in the back of the net.
He's also got to be playing more than like 8 to 10 minutes a night, right? That is just, you listen to guys that come out of the league. They'll never say it when they're in an organization, right? But like, you can't get into a game when you're only playing 2 to 3 minutes a period, right? Especially a guy like Igor that has been leaned on to, drive offense for whatever team he's been on for the past, I don't know, decade, probably his whole life, honestly.
Yeah.
Would love to see him.
Up. By the way, just because you mentioned, I pulled up his Elite Prospects page. His last year in Russia before coming to the Q, it's 73 points in 32 games.
Right. Would have just been a beast out there for sure. I mean, he's a beast out there wherever he's playing. Would love to see him put more pucks on net there too. I think he had a couple of shotless games with the Sens. He had a 3 or 4 shot game there too, right? It's encouraging to see also someone like Corey Pronman noticing that Sokolov's hockey IQ actually was like kind of up. It leveled up this year in the AHL. If you can think the game at that level, you can kind of make up for some skating pitfalls, and it's something that he's known since he was drafted. He has to work on too, right? So it really doesn't worry me too much.
The big thing with Igor is, and I met up with him this summer, is he has a whole different body frame. Like, he's not kind of the big, beefy, like power forward size. Like, he's worked really hard in this offseason to slim down and up that muscle. And he told me he skates quite often. He's working on the skating. So that kind of like big, lumbering, heavy shot forward, I don't think that's going to be his MO this season, because he's slimmed down. He's worked on the skating. And like you said, the hockey IQ is up. So he's not just going to be relying on being heavier than guys to outmuscle them. He can now outsmart guys and hopefully get a step or two ahead of them here. So that's where I really think, like we mentioned with Crooker having a big comeback season, look out for Igor. He's ready, and he put the work in this offseason.
So those are two guys who have come up through the ranks, and then a parachute prospect comes in and just starts lighting it up. Victor Lodin, an overager when he was drafted in 2019. He even got a taste of NHL action in Game 82 against Philadelphia. Is he more than a flash in the pan? Because he looked like a stud out there.
Yeah, he came in guns a-blazing, right? And his season, he only got better as the season went along in Sweden. It was great to see him come over early. I think caught a lot of people by surprise that he did that. This is the last year of his contract, his 2-year deal. And everyone on this list, I either expect them to make an NHL debut or play more than they did last season, whether that's more games or more minutes. So for him, I'd like to see him, earn an actual extended call-up. And hopefully we see that it wasn't just, a flash in the pan, that he was just riding a hot streak from Sweden, because he was contributing to Belleville right away, right? Was a key player in that push to the playoffs. So look at what Belleville's starting lineup was last season to what it will be this year, right? Adding guys like him or Cruikshank back into the lineup, or maybe some other names on this list. We'll see. Hoping to see a lot more goals down there too this year.
Mm-hmm. Does he score ugly goals? I only see him score highlight reel
goals. No, exactly. That's it. It's only highlight plays for sure.
Even the ones he doesn't score. Take us through that one highlight where he's like, he bats it over the defenseman's head. You know the one I'm talking about, right?
Oh yeah. I don't even know if at that point do you just like black out and you kind of like let your momentum take. I think he does like a 360 at some point too, or he's kind of playing like this hybrid hockey lacrosse out there. Again, right. He was a kid who was apparently one of the top players in Sweden when he was like 12 to 14 or something. And then it was just bitter aggression as he got older. I don't know, maybe he just didn't care as much, but who knows, a whole bunch of things. But that that talent that you can't teach is there, right? So, how does he adjust to the North American game, all that sort of stuff, living in probably Belleville most of the year? We'll see.
Now, is he the type of guy where they're going to have him in Belleville? Hopefully he impresses them. He gets a stint in the NHL, maybe like 5-10 games or something. And then are they going to be making their decision solely based on his NHL performance? I mean, like, do we see this guy playing in the NHL soon? Because he is 23. He was drafted in the 2019 draft. He already has over 100 SHL games. Like, he's kind of at a point now where we have an idea. We just need to see it at the NHL level. If he doesn't quite perform the way they want at the NHL, do you think they just cut ties and let him loose? Or is he a guy that there's enough there that maybe you can build on, and maybe he stays in Belleville and plays a top 6 supporting role and maybe gets an opportunity to make that crack at the NHL in the future?
I think this is the year for him as to whether or not he stays in North America or not, because otherwise he can go back to Sweden and make top end money and live a very comfortable life there, right? I think even getting him over to North America was a bit of a push from some things I heard. So great to see that he did it. Let's see what this season holds, but I do not see him as a guy who's going to want to come over here as like an AHL first player beyond this season. So we'll see.
Now, I saved the best name for last year, the one Sens fans are super excited about as we pull up the full list of NHL bubble prospects here, presented by Sens Prospects. You're already following him. Just a reminder, what a great guy. We say we need him for a few minutes. It's been almost an hour, but we really do appreciate you, Henry. Always one of the best friends of the show, no question. Now, Ridley Gregg. Of course, he has to serve a 1-game suspension when he starts his NHL career. Pilsy and I were front and center right when he made that hit on Pierre-Luc Dubois last preseason after scoring what was maybe the nicest goal all season for the Ottawa Senators. And it happened in game 1 of the preseason. But you don't have him as ready to graduate. What keeps him in this NHL bubble versus the final tier that we'll get to?
I see him. We've heard this come out a couple times over the past few weeks too, right? I think the Sens are pretty set on having him do the Josh Norris, even Drake Batherson route of you get pretty much a full season in Belleville, right? So I think he's a lock to make his NHL debut after that suspension at some point this season. But the bulk of his time is going to be down in Belleville. Also, I think hopefully, I've said this before, but he's got to get better at faceoffs if he wants to be a centerman. He's 48% in the dot in his WHL career, was only 52% last season at his age, right? So the flip side is you got someone like Claude Giroux now in Ottawa, who arguably one of the best guys in the faceoff circle. Hopefully, you can learn from him and grow that way, but that's why Ridley fits in this bubble, because I think he'll make his debut. He'll see some games, but again, should be in Belleville for most of the season. Would love to be proved wrong here, and the Sens get another asset in Ottawa, but that's just sort of how I see his season playing out.
And with Ridley, it's interesting because he plays that agitator, get under your skin role, but when you're getting under the skin of teenagers, the repercussions are one thing, but getting under the skin of grizzled AHL vets, guys who are trying to feed their families and trying to get better contracts, maybe you get a little bit stronger pushback than what he's used to. And so I think that's where him playing in the AHL, like, I don't have any doubts his skill can match, but can he keep that kind of rattiness, that greasy part of his game, and handle the repercussions? How do you think that fares when he's going from playing from boys to men here?
You don't love to see that he separates his shoulder, in the World Juniors, but it was a cheap play, right? But again, it's just like, oh man, how is he going to fare against pros? But I forget who was it. It was Crooker or Sokolov told you guys that having Scott Sabrin out there, right, makes the whole team feel like they're 6 inches taller and 25 pounds heavier, sort of thing, right? And so they've also got some big fellas on the back end there too in Belleville. So that's definitely something that I think he's going to want to get accustomed to in the Always Hungry League. We'll see. In Belleville, and look back on Drake and Josh Norris too. They both put on a ton of muscle working down in Belleville with
definitely Drake.
The strength and conditioning crew down there is fantastic too, right?
Yeah, big time. The other two guys on that list were Mark Kastelik and Lassie Thompson. I know Cassie's just your prototypical NHL, AHL kind of fourth line grind it out, and Lassie. Interesting though that you have him ahead of JBD. I'd assume by a fair margin.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, younger player. I thought he stood out more in the NHL, and also, he's a great example of like taking that step forward with an additional dimension of his game, with last season being his second year in the AHL, right? He was scoring much more regularly, more comfortable with the puck, becoming like integrating himself into more like offensive structures too, right? So that's I have him in a different tier for a reason, and expect to see more of him in Ottawa. I would put him in ahead of JBD in Ottawa's lineup right now.
Very interesting. I think people will find that interesting as well. So the ready to graduate tier. It's 3 deep. I think that it's probably in order of a potential impact, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, right. Sanderson and Pinto, right? These guys they're Ottawa Senators. And Parker Kelly, I think he spent more time in Ottawa than Belleville last year. Off the top of my head, I don't remember what his contract situation is looking like next year, but I think
next year.
Yeah. Okay. So that's it. He's an Ottawa guy. DJ clearly loves him. It seemed like there was a little speed bump for him last year too, even, right, where he got sent down, he got passed over with a couple call-ups, and I was like, oh man, did he kind of miss his window? But I think he's got a lot of supporters in the org beyond the coach too, right? So it's great to see someone who came to Sens Dev Camp as an invite go from that to contract to NHL regular. It's a testament to him as a person and a player.
2-time Jonathan Petro Award winner, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Yeah, that's incredible.
That tells you what you need to know. Pills, you got any questions on these guys? Or I feel like we've kept Henry pretty long here. I feel bad.
I'll do one question on Jake Sanderson, just because he's the prize jewel. Like, he's at the top of the prospect pyramid, so we'd be remiss not to discuss him. How much pressure do you think is on him to fulfill a top 4 role in the NHL? Like, is he going to get some leash here? And I guess I'll phrase the question this way: do you think they start him as a top 4 with the option to move him down, or do you think they start him in a limited role with the option to move him up?
Great question.
Thank you.
I would throw him right in there.
Okay.
Give as you can. Ottawa fans have had the opportunity to see Erik Karlsson and Thomas Chabot over the past 10-ish years kind of come up with, okay, this hype, what happens? I think everyone's Cody Ceci. I mean, scored an overtime winner early in his career, but like, the expectation is for Sanderson to kind of integrate seamlessly right to this roster. But I loved what Brent Wallace said on the show just a couple days ago, right? Was that I think a lot of the pressure this year is actually on the coaching staff in Ottawa. Jake Sanderson, I think we're going to have a lot of wow moments, maybe a couple speed bumps, but all in all, I think it's going to be an excellent rookie season. I'm not even too worried about it. So hopefully he's feeling equally calm.
Awesome. Well, Jake Sanderson, due to injury, did not participate on the on-ice portion of Sens Dev Camp that you were at, and I don't think you're going to see him there next year either, as he is ready to make a jump. If not as a top 4, he's an NHLer. So I like the way that you did this, Henry. We appreciate you breaking it down with us, and everyone is very excited to head over to this page. I bet you some people at the start, they opened up that video as well already. So everyone's already going to check it out at SensProspects YouTube page. Behind the scene, boots on the ground at Dev Camp, and they can follow you on Instagram as well. Sens Prospects there, Sens Prospects on Twitter. You probably already are, but one of the best friends of the show. Henry, thank you very much, man. We appreciate you.
Thanks so much, guys. Looking forward to the next one already.